One morning, a man named Andrew was rushing to his office before his boss arrived. Meanwhile, in an apartment, a woman named Margaret was getting ready to leave for work. Margaret is a chief editor in a publishing company in Boston, US. At the office, all the employees were afraid of her, thanks to her perfectionist nature and her strictness. They used to call her names behind her back. When Margaret arrived at her office, Andrew was already there waiting for her. He accompanied her to the company's marketing office. When they arrived, Margaret immediately fired Bob for a simple mistake. He forgot to call an author for their project. Even though it was just a trivial problem, Margaret still decided to fire him instead. When they returned to Margaret's office, she told Andrew to work tomorrow, even if it was Sunday. Andrew, who had planned to visit his mother in Alaska to celebrate his grandmother's 90th birthday, tried to refuse, but Margaret threatened to fire him if he didn't come. Shortly after, Margaret was called to her boss's office. She was informed that her work visa extension had been refused. It turned out that Margaret was an immigrant from Canada, and that year, her visa expired and had to be extended. She was forbidden from going anywhere until her visa was extended, but somehow, she went overboard before for the sake of her job. She was afraid that her project would not run smoothly. Even though she had her men on the project, she had a trust issue and would always get involved to check on the progress by herself. As for the violation of her visa, she was in danger of being deported from America back to Canada. If that happened, she would be fired, and the possible replacement in her position was Bob, the guy she just fired before. In the middle of the meeting, Andrew suddenly entered the office. Margaret suddenly got an idea. In order for her to keep her position, she told the supervisor that she and Andrew would be legally married soon, and the rule was that if an immigrant married a citizen, the immigrant would also be granted citizenship in just 3 years, not 5 years as the rule initially said. Andrew could say anything but nod. He knew that his boss had a problem, and he kept his mouth to help her out. Thankfully, her boss believed her and suggested she apply the marriage to immigration so that the problem could be resolved quickly. In a matter of seconds, the gossip about Margaret's marriage spread to all staff. They didn't expect Andrew to marry the boss. When they returned to Margaret's office, Andrew, who was already confused with all that, asked what she meant by marrying her. She explained that she was having a problem with her visa and she needed his help with that. But as expected, her high self-esteem showed her bossy nature. She said to apply their marriage documents to immigration without Andrew's consent. She said that they would have a sham marriage until her visa was extended, and in the next month, they would divorce. She reasoned that she didn't want to lose her job because Bob, the guy she fired who hated both of them, would replace her, and to top it all, he would eventually fire Andrew too. She asked him to help her if he wanted to keep his job. After work, they went to immigration to apply for their marriage. She asked the officer to hastily apply for the marriage, but the officer said that an application for 2 different citizenship marriages would take longer than normal marriages. They had to go through an interview process in different places and under full supervision. If they were proven lying about their marriage, Margaret would be deported back to Canada and banned from visiting America, while Andrew would be sentenced to 5 years in prison or fined $250,000. She tried to prove that their marriage was real. She said that they had been dating and they had planned to meet Andrew's parents on Sunday to celebrate his grandmother's birthday. Thankfully, the officer believed their story, but he said that he would still supervise them to make sure everything was right. After they got out of there, Margaret planned her work for the next month and explained all rules when they were doing their fake dating. Feeling that Margaret was taking advantage of him, Andrew felt annoyed, especially since the risk of being found out was too great. If she still wanted to do the thing, Andrew asked for 3 conditions. He wanted his work to be published, moved to the editor division, and lastly, the most shocking of all that made Margaret baffled, he wanted her, a woman with high self-esteem, to kneel down, begging him to marry her. She was shocked to hear all that, but she was in dire need of help, and so she did it.
Does this work for you?
Oh, I like it.
Andrew, please, cherries on top, marry me?
But I'll do it. See you at the airport tomorrow.
Good.
On Sunday, Andrew and Margaret went off to Alaska to meet his parents. On the plane, Margaret said that she would stay in the hotel during her visit. She knew that Alaska was not as luxurious as where they came from and said that Andrew's family must be poor, so she promised not to be a bother to them. Moreover, she told him that later on in the interview, when the officer asked where they usually spent their time while dating, she told Andrew to just say that they mostly spent their time in her apartment. She expected that Andrew's apartment was not as big as hers and thought that the officer wouldn't believe a boss like her would like to spend her time in a small apartment. Hearing that, Andrew didn't say anything. When they arrived, Andrew's mother and grandmother were there to pick them up. On their way, Margaret saw almost every building has Andrew's family name on it. Even the bag's brand he brought had the name Paxton on it. At the port, Margaret asked his permission to look for a hotel, but Andrew's mother offered she stayed with them. When she found out that they had to take a boat to reach his house, she said that Andrew's family was too poor, they had to take the boat to reach their house. She thought that Andrew lived far away from the town because he was so poor. But after taking the boat for quite some time, they finally arrived at the house of the Paxton family. A very big house on a private island, the island that Andrew's family owned. Not only that, the businesses and properties in the town that had the Paxton family name on them were also owned by them, including the hospital and airport there. She never expected that Andrew's family was extremely rich. When they arrived at the house, they were welcomed with a party. Margaret asked why he didn't tell her about his family, but he replied that it was not important. On top of that, his family has no relation to his work. Shortly after, Andrew's ex-girlfriend showed up. He then introduced her to Margaret. His mother then asked him to tell her how he proposed to Margaret. Since they never expected to be asked such a question, they lied about it. Somehow, because of the difference between their story, they ended up insulting each other. When they finished, everyone cheered for them. They asked him to kiss and Andrew immediately grabbed Margaret's hand and kissed it. Nobody expected him to kiss her hand. They forced them both to kiss on the lips, and to avoid any suspicion, they finally did it, just to make things between them more awkward. After that, they then went to the bedroom to get some rest, but since there was only a single bed there, Andrew had to sleep on the floor. The next day, Margaret had a call from her client, but during the call, the family dog came to her and disturbed her call. Something funny happened when an eagle suddenly showed up and picked up the dog.
As well, they are just so to be happy. Frank, give me that dog! Come on. Oh, okay, I dropped the phone now. Listen, Frank. Sorry, okay, bye-bye. No, wait! Here, take the dog, take the dog, take the dog, take it.
She tried to get the dog back by throwing her phone and managed to catch the dog, but to her surprise, the eagle attacked and took her phone. Amid the panic, Andrew approached her. Margaret told to her soon-to-be husband that her phone was taken by an eagle. As a good boyfriend, even though it was just a setting, Andrew promised to buy her a new phone. He then told her to hug him because her mother and grandmother were watching them from the window. Later that day, Andrew met his father, who was playing golf. His father told him that he would soon retire and asked him to replace him to take over the family business. It turned out that they had talked about it over and over again. His father even once put him into a relationship with his business partner, but Andrew never wanted to take responsibility for the family business nor accept the matchmaking. He is an adult and he could decide whatever he wanted. He even said that he would never come back if it was not for his grandmother. In a bar for women, Margaret, along with Andrew's mother, grandmother, and ex-girlfriend were having a bachelor party. The party was intended to keep the custom for every couple that would marry must have a bachelor party. The party was getting wild, so Margaret chose to get out to get some fresh air. That was when Andrew's girlfriend showed up. She congratulated her and said that she was a lucky girl for having a man like Andrew. She told Margaret all her good memories back then when she was still dating Andrew. Margaret didn't seem to care, but somehow, she felt jealousy building in her heart. When they came home, they saw Andrew venting his anger by chopping some wood while listening to music. His mother knew well that he would do that every time he argued with his father, so she went to scold his husband. That father-son argument was never been solved ever since the old days. Her husband was always forcing his selfishness on Andrew, even though Andrew always refused. She wanted her husband to respect Andrew's choice for his life and gave in to all the family business stuff. Margaret overheard the conversation from afar. Later on, when Margaret had just come out of the bathroom after taking a shower, Andrew entered the room without knocking. Things between them got awkward once again. At night, Margaret asked Andrew why he chose to be an editor instead of doing his family business. Andrew said that he always dreamed to be an editor since he was just a kid. Carried on by the atmosphere, Margaret told Andrew her life story too. Back then in Canada, she was the only of her parents. She went to America from Canada even though she had nobody here. She struggled to meet her life until she finally had a job in a decent company, even a decent position as she had now. And from there, from the tough life she had, she became what she is now, a hard and strict woman that everyone is scared of at the office. Since then, Andrew got to know her more. He knew that his boss was just like other women, someone that needed love for her. A woman that covered her fragile heart with her toughness. The next morning, when Andrew and Margaret were still sleeping, someone knocked on their room. Margaret panicked and immediately woke Andrew to ask him to move beside her. When the door was opened, all the family went in.
Room for one more?
Wow.
Mother and I have come up with a problem.
It would be a dream come true. So you'll do it?
We don't want to ruin it. That's, you know, that's...
Out of nowhere, Andrew's grandmother asked them to move the wedding day to tomorrow, her birthday. They were both shocked and tried to get an excuse to refuse the plan. His grandmother kept pushing them to do so, and they had no choice but to accept it. His mother told them that everyone in the family would arrange everything so they didn't have to worry about anything. When they finally left, Andrew panicked. His family had gone too far with his life. He was afraid that if they married and divorced after just a month, his grandmother would have a heart attack. Unexpectedly, Margaret hugged and consoled her fake lover to calm him down, only to realize what she had done later. Later that morning, Margaret took a bike ride to calm her mind, but instead of calming down, she even got more mixed feelings. She remembered her unconscious act of hugging Andrew that morning. In the middle of the ride, she heard a strange sound from the forest, and when she checked, it was Andrew's grandmother performing a strange ritual to make sure everything went smoothly on the wedding day tomorrow. Margaret joined the ritual, but instead of doing the ritual dance, she instead embarrassed herself. While dancing, Andrew suddenly came to pick her up to buy her a new phone. She was so embarrassed she didn't expect him to see her like that. At the store, after getting her new phone, Margaret said that she had to reply to an email from her client. Knowing her phone wouldn't be able to reply to emails, Andrew took her to an internet cafe. When Margaret was using the computer, she saw Andrew talking to his ex-girlfriend from the window. She was jealous. She knew that she had fallen in love with him, but on the other hand, she also knew that Andrew would never fall in love with a woman like her. On their way home, they met Andrew's mother and grandmother. They told Andrew to wait at the boat while they took Margaret with them. They went to a clothes shop. When trying on a dress, Andrew's grandmother told Margaret that the dress she was using was the dress she used at her wedding. Not only the dress, but Andrew's grandmother also gave Margaret a necklace that had been passed down in the Paxton family. She had been dreaming of giving the necklace to Andrew's future wife, and finally, she was able to do it. She was touched. After years of living alone, she was able to feel the warmth of a family once again. When she got on the boat later, she took over the wheel and took the boat at full speed. In the middle of their way, Margaret told Andrew that she couldn't continue their lies. She couldn't bear to hurt his family that had been nice to her. Andrew panicked at her action, and suddenly, when she let the wheel, the boat took a sharp turn and she fell from the boat. Thankfully, Andrew managed to save her. He looked so worried, as if he didn't want to lose her. Later, when they arrived home, Andrew's father asked both of them to talk with him at the warehouse. Apparently, there was an immigration officer who already waited for them. Somehow, Andrew's father and the officer had found out that the marriage was just a lie they made to smoothen Margaret's visa extension process. The officer threatened Andrew to be honest or he would end up in jail. Hearing the threat, instead of being afraid, Andrew got angry. He was fed up with his father interfering in his personal matters, even to the point of involving the immigration officer. He knew that his father did that to make him give up on his work as an editor and continue the family business. He confidently said that he loved Margaret. No matter what happened, he would marry her and make her the happiest woman in the world. Hearing that made his father silent. At the night, they had to sleep separately because they were about to get married. That night, Andrew couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what he had told that day. He knew that he said all of that from his deepest heart, but he doubted Margaret would feel the same. In another room, Margaret couldn't sleep as well. She was touched by Andrew's words, but she doubted that he really meant it. On top of that, she was also feeling guilty. All the time she was there, she only caused problems for Andrew and his family. The next day, the long-awaited day had finally come. Everyone was attending the ceremony, even the immigration officer was there. The whole family looked happy until when Margaret and Andrew were about to say their vow. Margaret suddenly stopped. She confessed that the marriage was nothing but a set. Since she came to the family, she always felt their warmth and kindness for her. She didn't have the heart to lie to them and decided to confess in front of everyone. She also said that she was the one planning the wedding and Andrew was just a victim because she threatened to fire him if he refused to get involved. After her confession, she immediately left from there. Andrew tried to calm everyone while still thinking about her. He tried to look for her in her room, but to his surprise, she was not there. He only found the wedding dress, the script he wrote, and a letter from Margaret saying she apologized for not publishing his work. She knew how good his work was, but she never published it because she didn't want to lose such a reliable assistant like Andrew. She promised to publish his work before she got deported back to Canada. Suddenly, his ex-girlfriend came. She told him to pursue his love. Hearing that, he rushed to chase Margaret. At the boat, the immigration officer took Margaret home. The officer gave her a day for her to pack her things and left America. On the other hand, Andrew, who was rushing to catch up with Margaret, was stopped by his father. He told Andrews to stop what he was about to do. Looking at the never-ending argument between them both made Andrew's grandmother faint from a heart attack. Not long after, the ambulance plane came to take her to the hospital. On the plane, his grandmother looked so weak. She asked her son and grandson to make up and respect each other's decisions. For her, Andrew and his father decided to stop their argument. Slowly, she closed her eyes like she was about to die, but suddenly, she opened her eyes back. She remembered that Andrew had to catch up with Margaret at the airport. She told the pilot to take turns to the airport. When they finally arrived at the airport, Andrew immediately called his friend who worked in the watchtower to stop a plane that was about to take off for Boston. Unfortunately, he was late. The plane was already taken off from there. The next day, Margaret was seen packing things from her office. When she asked one of the staff for help, Andrew showed up in front of her. While catching up his breath after running, he told her not to leave after everything they went through. She had ruined his years working with such a cruel boss. She had ruined the wedding ceremony they had been planning, and the most painful thing was, she had broken his heart for leaving him. He asked her to take responsibility for making him fall in love with her. He told her not to leave after what she had done to him. In front of everyone, he dared himself to propose to her. When she realized that the man he loved proposed to her, Margaret immediately accepted the proposal. They kissed in front of everyone. Days later, Margaret and Andrew went to the immigration office to reapply for their marriage. Even though the officer was still mad at them for lying to him the other day, he still gave them the second chance with one condition: no more lies between them. The officer approved their application.